We have quite an array of business. They have 6 different items. The first one being a lease to Global Air LLC.
I've got that one.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This is a lease agreement with Globe Aero that seeks to lease space, office and hangar space in the airside facility. The tenant actually...
Ramona, could you please stand
Oh,
for
sure.
this
Sorry.
virtual? Thank you.
I'll try to project this.
Thank
video,
you.
so that's very helpful. This lease agreement is for office and hangar space at the airside facility. The tenant actually operates 2 businesses, Legend Health and Globe Aero. And what he's seeking to do is we've renegotiated this lease because he has sold one of his businesses. So he's seeking to move Globe Aero into the larger space and relinquish the smaller space where Legend Health was. So that the term of the lease will be for a 1-year term. It's retroactive to May 1st, 2021, which was consistent with his other leases, and we were planning on bringing this to you previously, but I believe Mr. Putnam, the tenant, has some health issues and things like that, so we're bringing this lease to you now. It contains 4 additional 1-year renewal options upon mutual written agreement of the parties. The blended rate will be $3,928.55 per month. That would commence again May 1st, 2021. The annual base rent would be $47,142.60. That amount includes utilities. It does not include tax, which the tenant would be responsible for. And then thereafter, rent will be subject to annual 2% increases that would commence with the fiscal year of October 1st, 2022, and then any subsequent renewals thereafter.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any questions from our committee?
The only question that I would have is there a, as I'm looking at the second paragraph here, he notified the airport that they wouldn't need the space anymore, and then it looks like they're either, are they subleasing it, or they're just getting out and then somebody else is taking over?
They're relinquishing it, and then the airport will be able to lease out that 820 square feet that's available.
Were they currently under an obligation that we're letting them out of?
I believe that was, they were in, I think it was their second renewal period. Jean can speak to that, but I think it was a mutual agreement. I think they approached the airport about that when he was interested in selling his business.
Correct, and we need the space. Some of our flight schools are looking to expand and need additional space as well, so we're going to be able to fill that pretty quick.
Thank you.
I presume we can get more money at the next lease rate term too?
We will do our best. Yes, sir.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion is a second, and all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. We have 5 different orders of acquisitions of properties that are city-owned. When will we be doing that?
Sure. And although there's 5 of these, they all are very similar, so I don't think this will take too long. All 5 of these are essentially rejects from the city's affordable housing land bank program. All 5 of these properties are small, undevelopable properties. So we advertised these for sale and got interest from adjacent property owners for the most part. There's one that's a little bit different that are interested in acquiring these properties and simply incorporating them into their existing properties, their adjacent properties. The first one is Samuel Brown requesting to purchase 401 Quincy Street. I don't know who's got the slide. Okay, it's already up there. Already up there, okay. Well, that's 708. Should be 401 Quincy. You got that one. There we go. So this one has a property appraiser assessed value of $6,719. Our general policy has been to require a minimum bid of at least 120% of the property appraiser's assessed value, and we exceeded that here. Mr. Brown bid $8,500. He was the only bidder on the property. So we're recommending sale of 401 Quincy Street to Samuel Brown.
Okay, I have a question. Where do we advertise when we put these properties available for sale?
And for small properties like this, we just do it in the ledger. I mean, if you're dealing with a major property, we put a sign up, and in some cases, we even publish it.
So we put a sign up on the property?
In this case, I don't think we did. This was just an advertisement in the ledger.
How do the adjoining property owners know it's for sale? They just have to be lucky and read the ledger?
No, most of the time it's, why should I answer? Can you go right here?
So
Can you please, thank you.
good morning, Tamika Hillier with the Office of Real Estate and Property Information. In situations like this where it's just properties that are undevelopable, the interested party will contact the City of Lakeland and submit a written inquiry. And then we'll start the process of evaluating and having city staff to review it to make certain that it's not already designated for a city project or anything. And then we move forward with the advertising and establishing a minimum bid amount.
And you say undevelopable, is this a non-conforming lot? It's 41 feet by 72. Is that not, that's not buildable lot? Okay, so it's a surplus.
Right.
Okay.
And I think in all of these cases, Tamika, that the adjacent property owner was the one that initiated the request.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, the only question that I would have would be along those lines is as we're looking at the schematic here, if the property happened to be the property in the middle of two lots and the buyer on the right happened to make the request and the buyer on the left didn't realize that it was available, so it seems a little bit unequitable for somebody to just request for property without it being fully notified out there. I mean, even if it's undevelopable, I mean, you know, neighbors certainly would want to be able to increase their square footage if they could, but it's not being aware until they reach out to Tamika or somebody is. I just see that could be an issue.
Well, please. The mayor's texting me over and over and over. He can't hear anybody on the peripheral.
As quickly as I used to.
Thank you.
Good morning. We can certainly start adding signage to the mix when we advertise these kinds of properties. They are, by and large, not only undevelopable, but pretty well unmarketable. They don't have any value to anyone but adjacent property owners.
Yeah.
Putting the signage up has the additional potential to elicit bids from parties that aren't adjacent. So that.
Yeah, I can see where it would certainly open a can of worms on one side. I just am thinking that, man, if Tiger's on one side and I'm on the other and he buys it, I'm a little frustrated I didn't have that opportunity. So, yeah, it was just a curiosity I had. It's not.
Yes, sir. And we do not have adjacent property owners or owners in general beating our doors down to purchase these lots. We hold them for years and years as we have evaluated them for the Affordable Housing Land Bank. That's when we've really set aside the properties that either because of dimensions or zoning compatibility are not suitable for that. So correct.
Gotcha. Okay, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So to have 5 or 6 of these come in at the same time, is that because they were originally considered as part of the land bank and then they were rejected all at once and we advertised at the same time?
Well, they were rejected. Palmer called them rejects. When we evaluated the holdings, when we evaluated those holdings over a year ago, those properties were not included in the initial round of properties that the commission authorized for inclusion in the land bank and delegated the disposition authority to staff. So they sort of became just surplus land that was available, and we didn't do anything to really affirmatively market those, understanding their limited value to all but adjacent property owners. So these just, Tamika maybe can speak to the coincidental timing of so many, or we may have worked to get all of those on a single agenda.
Okay.
The inquiries have come through from the individual, the initiators of the sale. So we just worked them all together. It's by coincidence that it was 5 this time.
Okay, thank you.
Do I hear a motion on 401 Quincy Street?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Number 2.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Walker.
No, it's your committee, not mine. And I'm not on the committee either. But I want to make sure, as I heard Commissioner Music mention about the situation, we know over the years, we tend to find, especially in some of your more, I call distressed areas like this, you find those neighbors who, those lots are just so small as we know, they just buy the next lot to them because they want more space. They want to be able to have their icon square footage.
Most instances, they've been maintaining them anyway.
Yeah, most of the time, that's what they're doing. So that's what I've seen, of course, over the years, and I can appreciate the conversation, but that's what we tend to find, especially up here in this particular neck of the woods.
Yeah, thank you. There again, Mr. Brewis, in the future, maybe if we would reach out to these adjoining property owners, we might be able to divest ourselves of some of these unwanted properties, and if we have some surplus stuff that's unmarketable per se, that might be something to do, but anyway.
We can do that.
Okay,
All right, next item is 702 West 4th Street, request by Daniel Correa and Linda Joseph Correa to purchase that property. They are again adjacent property owners. This is a .1 acre undevelopable parcel. The property appraiser's assessed value is $4,830. They bid $6,500, which exceeds our 120% minimum bid requirement for the property. So we were requesting to sell this to Daniel and Linda Joseph Correa.
any questions? We'll entertain a motion.
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a first and a second. That motion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Third item is 708 North Missouri Avenue. New Birth Deliverance Ministry, Inc. is the requester for this property. They own the adjacent property to the north, .09 acre undevelopable parcel. Property appraiser assessed value $5,950. They bid $7,205 for the property, again exceeding the minimum bid requirement. Recommended for approval.
And that's, this is 60 by 32 foot piece of property, so that is quite small. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Next is 119 West Myrtle Street. Again, New Birth Deliverance Ministry requested to purchase this property. They own the adjacent parcel to the north. This is .1 acre undeveloped parcel. Property appraiser's assessed value $6,901. The bid by New Birth was $8,305, again exceeding the 120% threshold.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. And our last case,
Final one is 1219 Sycamore Street. Leroy Goodman has requested to purchase that property. He doesn't own the adjacent property, but he owns the property across the street from this one, just to the south, I believe. This is a .14 acre undeveloped parcel. This is a little bit different in that we do have a wastewater utility easement or facility over the north 10 feet of the property, so we're going to need to reserve a 10-foot utility easement over the north 10 feet of this property on the sale of the property. Property appraiser's assessed value of $4,541. Mr. Goodman bid $5,670, which exceeds the 120% minimum threshold that we've established.
does the buyer understand that we're going to withhold a easement on this property?
I believe so. We lost Tamika, but they will if they
We'll
don't.
find out.
We'll make sure they know. But we have to reserve that easement, though.
Good.
Commissioner Reed, on this one, it is undeveloped but not undevelopable, right? I mean, because it looks like it's...
It's 45.
My discussion with community development, all of these were determined to be undevelopable.
Okay.
Yes.
So the length on this one is the issue? I mean, obviously it's wide enough.
No, sir. It's zoned I-1.
Oh, okay, so it's just the zoning.
I actually questioned that too. I
Yeah.
saw the dimensions and I said, Tamika and Teresa, this one looks buildable.
Yeah.
And then they said,
Okay.
oh, it's an I-1 district. We don't want to build any affordable housing in it.
Understood, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I entertain a motion?
To approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. I see no other order of business on here unless there's a question from some of our members.
Just for purposes of Monday, my suggestion would be that we just combine all 5 of those into one
I'd prefer
item.
that.
We'll just have a list type approach and do it all at once unless there's any objection.
I concur with that.
Okay.
It's be less reading and less time consuming for that. With that, it's appears to be 8:30, and we will adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. And I appreciate the fact that list moved right into our agenda study start time. And that will allow us to take a look at what we have in front of us for the meeting on Monday. We start at 9, of course, again, and Citrus Connection route update in the squeeze will be discussed. Then we will have budget presentation award that we have received once again, which is exciting. And a check presentation from the Rotary Club for the to be announced for us. And then we have the consent items. On consent, for this meeting, are strictly the minutes that we have, and so I would assume that's fine with everyone. Both utility and the commission meeting, correct? And I see no other consent items. We'll have an equalization hearing, and we will again pose those items on the screen as we go through that. And we come back as a commission, and then we will maybe for hearings, ordinance, readings. And so, do you, Attorney Davis, do you take those? That would be good.
Okay, and just backing up the equalization hearing, there's one demolition assessment to consider. However, there is a glitch with the advertising for that, so we're going to pull that as well as the associated resolution later in the agenda, and that will come back to you at a future city commission meeting.
Which one was that? I'm sorry, Tom.
The equalization,
Okay.
demolition.
Both of them
There's
are
two
just
on.
Actually, yeah, there are two, actually. They're the same amount, but there are two of them. But nonetheless, the advertising problem is with respect to both of them, so we'll have to bring that back to you. So that goes back to public hearings for second reading and consideration of adoption on Monday. The first two items are related to the property, the large field just to the east of Larson Power Plant across the street. The first item is the land use for that. I don't know if we can pull that up. Is Teresa's doing this remotely?
She is.
Okay, gotcha, okay. All right, so the first item is the land use for this property, and the second item would be the zoning. The bottom line is that the two approvals would result in the development of 199 single-family detached dwellings, and also allow for 2 commercial nodes on the property, and I'll turn it over to either Teresa or whoever's going to do this.
Good morning. We went through this one at the last agenda study in quite a bit of detail, so I can either present the slides again or hold those off for Monday or answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions on this particular item? I know we have gone through it quite a bit. Commissioner Reed, is that your hand? Yes, sir.
It is, yes. Teresa, this is basically a downzoning, correct?
It is not a down zoning because there is no zoning on the property except for the northern portion that has multifamily zoning. However, on the frontage of Memorial, it is a reduction in intensity for the land use. So currently there are commercial land use there, and the ask is to make that residential.
I was referring to the top, the first one being the 8 acres on the front. Yes, thank you.
There are.
Let's go to the second item.
Okay, the second item is related to the first item. The first item is the comprehensive plan amendment. The second item would be the zoning to approve the development of this property. The third and fourth items are related to one another as well. This is Dean Saunders' office building on 1723 Highway 98 South. It's that building just to the south of the McDonald's at Grove Park. So number 3 would be a small-scale amendment to the comp plan from residential medium to community activity center. And the fourth item would be the associated zoning to change from O1 and RA3 to PUD to allow for some office and limited commercial uses. I'll turn it over to Teresa for any elaboration.
So the request on this was to not only recognize potential for office on the back portion of the overall development area, but also to allow flexibility in the future for some limited retail uses on the frontage of West 98. So the conditions do address the prohibition of certain uses and then also deal with access to the site.
Mr. Mayor, you're muted again.
It seems there's no questions as we go forward, so let's go on to the next item.
Okay, the next item would be number 5, 21025, which is a change in zoning from Office 1 to C1, pedestrian commercial, and that is to recognize existing commercial uses on this property at 3252 Kathleen Road. I believe this is just a little bit south of Sleepy Hill Road up there. So this would turn the use of that property into conforming use and allow a little bit more flexibility for commercial uses. Teresa, anything else?
Just at this site, you're probably more familiar with it as the MFD Pawn and Jewelry Store. It's right at the southwest corner of Pine Road and Kathleen. And the owner has approached us in the past about wanting some additional commercial uses on the site. So this is in response to his request.
I have a question.
Okay, no, any questions?
Mr. Walker has a question.
Commissioner Walker.
Commissioner Walker, I didn't see your hand, sorry.
That's okay, I'm sorry. Knowing what we have up in that area, and I know that there's a new McDonald's just came up in that area, Ms. Teresa, and you got the school still there. I asked this question before, as we saw that development come into place, because that Kathleen and Griffin Road kind of intersection there, where you got 2 apartment complexes coming into play. You already have Publix there. You got the other businesses there.
Just about right.
Could you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. You could hear me, right, Teresa?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I was sharing with you, I know I've asked before, and I'm concerned about traffic, and Mr. Bobby is here, but, we got that development coming in to play there as this area is being developed. And my concern is always has been the school there, Griffin Elementary, which is just across the street. The kind of traffic there, the intersection of Kathleen and Griffin, McDonald's just landed there. Other things, I guess, will probably land there on this particular area of the site. We've done our due diligence to make sure the traffic for that particular area has been looked into properly, because you got the new apartment complexes coming in, and I just want to make sure that has been taken care of or been looked at properly.
And I'll address that real quick. I believe that we have, for the property to the south that came through for kind of a zoning change about this time last year. We had an updated traffic analysis conducted for the Ruthin property, which is the Wayne White subdivision immediately to the south that now has the McDonald's, the adjacent commercial entitlements. Walgreens and all that. Those all are required to have cross-access. There's an internal road system so that the traffic is not all coming out onto Kathleen Road or Griffin Road. So we've got good circulation. We also have requirements related to Kathleen Road that if the point it meets signal warrants, then that median has to get directionalized or modified so that it pushes if you're trying to head north on Kathleen, you'll go down to Griffin and turn left to head north. With the Ruthin's property, we also have a requirement for a cross-connectivity to this particular site, which has the signal access there at Pine Road opposite the school. And then, with this site, going from O1 zoning to C1 zoning has no effect on traffic, because C1 is a pedestrian level commercial. So just for this specific zoning action, the traffic impacts are going to be minimal, if any. But with some of the cross-connectivity requirements we have on the properties to the south that are under PUD or that custom zoning designation, I believe we've got everything covered and in fact having a more commercial area here will help take some of the pressure off of 98 and everything we're seeing to the east of the site. With all those apartments that are coming in on Griffin Road, we need to be able to distribute that traffic, for shopping and eating and all that, both east and west, and this will help further that goal.
And I guess a lot of questions I know that we may come is because you got Howland Fairways there, which is a retirement community. And I don't say it to be negative, I say it because we tend to find, because retirement communities, as you start seeing growth around them, they start to ask questions about, hey, why are you doing this? Why we got so much traffic out here? And we hear those kind of things. I know, at least I do, I'm sure you all do too. So that's why I want to make sure we have done our due diligence. And if I hear you correct, the circulation is going to be in that particular component will help support not pulling much traffic onto Kathleen and Griffin and not affect the school there.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
The mayor and I were texting. I'm going to take it so there's not feedback, and then he'll rate. Just let me know, Kevin, when he raises his hand for questions. Yeah. Any other questions on that was item number 4? Or is that item number 5? Sorry. Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Okay, Palmer.
All right, 6 is the major modification of a conditional use for the St. Joseph's School, former Southside Baptist Church property on Frank Lloyd Wright Way. Florida Southern College is requesting the authority to use that property for up to 400 graduate level students as classroom, lab room, that type of thing. Teresa?
This one, again, here's the overall campus master or campus site plan. The sanctuary sits here, the classroom building is here to the west. All of the buildings and infrastructure that's there today will remain in place. Open spaces will remain, parking areas will remain. The exception to that is the the elimination of a dumpster that sits on Pennsylvania, and then the combining of that solid waste collection with the dumpster that sits over on the Colony Arms Park site. And with regard to the parking lots, all of those will now be brought up to City of Lakeland standards with regard to surface materials and then also landscaping. And I think the one remaining issue that you may have heard about is that dumpster location. I'm going to jump ahead to slide here. Give me just a second. So this is the dumpster that will now accommodate both the classroom and campus facilities along with the Colony Arms Department. This dumpster will have an upgraded dumpster enclosure. I'm getting feedback. Are you all getting feedback as well?
No.
Sorry about that. Okay. So the enclosure will be upgraded to city standards. There have already been some changes put in place in response to some concerns raised by an adjacent neighbor to the north. So the dumpster has been changed out with a lid that is not metal to reduce noise. Going forward, and the collection time has changed. Going forward, the back wall of this enclosure will be masonry to help, again, eliminate the noise concerns. Despite those changes, the neighbor had still asked for the dumpster to potentially be located within the parking lot here, just south of the butterfly garden and the gazebo, which then presents additional problems in terms of collection times that would then change the collection time to having to be earlier because we need to have those parking spaces freed up during the day. And it really only results in a slight change in the distance from that residence. So you can see currently it's at 120 feet plus or minus, and then what's being requested from that landowner is to have it at 187 feet. But planning staff and public works staff have looked at this carefully and believe that the current location at Colony Arms provides the best alternative to help mitigate impacts to all of the neighbors.
All right, do we have questions for Teresa? Yes, sir. Commissioner Reed.
Teresa, I thought there was some discussion about some traffic issues initially, and I thought there were going to be, I know when the school was going on, there was, on Pennsylvania, it was one way for a certain period of time. Has that been addressed again, or is there something in there we didn't discuss today, or am I missing something?
Right, so you can see in this image here that there's some signage related to the pickup and the drop-off along Pennsylvania. So all of that is being eliminated now, and I believe those areas are going to become ultimately on-street parking spaces, and the same for the spaces on Frank Lloyd right way.
Teresa, you're showing just Frank Lloyd right away. Is there a picture of, is it Pennsylvania? With the time restriction?
I don't know that you may see a sign back there in the background that may be that time restriction. This is Pennsylvania.
So that was not an issue with the neighborhood? Okay.
Their issue was that, don't you?
So you said, Chuck, that the designation goes away for that one way?
Exactly.
Any other questions?
This is just Florida Southern on behalf of the Diocese of Orlando, so they're not a change of ownership at this point. They're just going to be the tenants.
They have it under contract to purchase.
They do have it under contract to purchase, okay.
Mr. Mayor, you're good?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, the next item is a request by Alliance for Independence for a conditional use to allow an adult daycare and vocational training facility at 2710 West Memorial Boulevard. This is the old I believe it's auto owners office building there, just to the northeast of the Lone Palm Golf Course. I think there's one slight transportation issue that's still a little bit in play on this. I think the DOT does not want them to have direct access from their property, and they want them to have a cross-access easement over to the property to the east. So I'll let Chuck address that.
Sure, and this is something that's still ongoing in terms of conversations with DOT, but as Mr. Davis said, right now the auto owner site has two driveway connections onto Memorial Boulevard. The eastern part of that site is going to become a surgical center, and that's going to be owned by a different entity, and they're going to be required to have cross-access with this parcel that will be purchased by Alliance for Independence. DOT's interpretation of statute and their permitting requirements at this point are saying that because it's a change of use, that the western driveway, which I'm pointing right here, right across from Sunbelt Rentals, that has to be removed. Now, the proposed use, Alliance for Independence, their trip generation is going to be about 100 vehicles a day less than what would be allowed by an office use. So our position, and certainly down the line, is that this should not represent a significant change that would require the removal of this driveway on Memorial Boulevard. So even up until late last night, Alliance for Independence's council has asked DOT to revisit their review of that statute because there's some question about, the use of or and what it applies to. But essentially, this use is going to be less intensive than the insurance company that was there before, and that it should not require the removal of a driveway and the cost that would have to be incurred for that to happen.
What can we do, Chuck, to help AFI? Like, what can we do as a city in our codes or anything to assist them with working with DOT? Is there anything that we can do, or do we have to defer to DOT? Like, how does that work?
I think at this point, officially, it would be deferring to DOT, but certainly comments on Monday at the hearing, just kind of asking staff to continue to work with DOT to make this issue go away, allow the driveway to remain, continue to require the cross-access between the two parcels, I think would be very helpful for us to then go back to DOT and say, the commission asked us to ask you, DOT, to revisit this issue. So it would just be the ask of staff on Monday, and we can go back to DOT and act on AFI's behalf.
Yes, Commissioner McCarthy. Madam, sorry, I'm McCarthy. I saw her first, sorry.
Another madam.
Yes.
Chuck. So I have talked to Alliance for Independence about this as well, and I am curious for City Attorney Davis if there's a way for us to remove number 6 and number 8 in order to give them conditional use.
Removing condition 6?
6 and 8.
6 and 8? I think we probably could remove those. It's not going to make the DOT's jurisdiction over the road go away, but, it at least doesn't impose any kind of city impediment to
Agree
them.
with the city.
Right.
So I know they're doing some advocacy with the state levels. Kelly Stargell, is advocating on their behalf with FDOT. So if they could have this conditional use to go ahead and get their construction permits and go ahead and start to do some of their modifications. They've been delayed because of COVID, and we all know the good work they do for, their clients. And I'm glad that Chuck brought up the trip generation. A lot of them come in by bus or by van, and these are adults and individuals with special needs. So to not have access by that driveway is a huge curveball for them to get this far into the process. So anything that we can do for Alliance for Independence to give them this conditional use, to get them the permits and to kind of get going, I think would benefit them. To Commissioner McCarley's point, what we could do for them initially, certainly then they do have to continue working with FDOT and try to, work on, then they'll just have one legislative body to be working with instead of two.
And if I may, we have a revised condition for number 8, which softens the language and really acknowledges that there still has to be DOT permitting that occurs, but, that would allow the project to continue to move forward. We would take away any potential obstructions that would affect them in terms of building permit or site plan submittal and approvals. And so what we would say is that they shall coordinate with DOT for any future access modifications, and that if the driveway does in fact ultimately have to be removed, that we would be able to approve that administratively. So we would not have to have there would be no impact from a zoning standpoint that would require them to have to come back for an additional approval. But at least it acknowledges that we do have a permitting issue with DOT that ultimately, they're going to have a say on that driveway, but we want to take away the zoning issue while acknowledging that permitting requirement. In terms of the cross-access under Condition 6, the Land Development Code requires on this type of roadway, Memorial Boulevard is what we call a Type 1 road because of high-speed truck traffic. And so our own Land Development Code requires that cross-access to be in place. But we believe that cross-access and the two driveways in this instance are really two separate issues. Because having the two driveway connections, and we're only talking about a 50 to 70-foot variance from DOT's normal standards anyway in terms of driveway spacing, that it just helps improve the circulation between the two properties, because we're going to have paratransit vehicles coming in and dropping folks off at probably the surgical center as well as AFI. And so that cross-access is important to be able to at least show that we're adhering to our own Land Development Code requirements. It just helps with overall circulation.
And did you have the conversations with them about their initial plans to fence off each of the independent businesses now that instead of being one, contiguous ownership, and they're dealing with patients and clients who do have special needs. Their intent initially was to fence off and to be completely separate parcels. So would the cross-access preclude that? That's my first point. And then secondly, with cross-access, they're worried about the funds necessary to maintain all of that access in perpetuity versus just their small driveway and potential situation with DOT in
The cross-access can be managed. I mean, we see instances where there are gates and other things that the individual property owners can manage that access as long as it's available. Then it becomes a management issue, and generally we try to leave that up to the individual property owners, whatever they've worked out through the individual agreements, because we would have two separate agreements that should be compatible with each other when all said and done. And so I think the gate, that can be managed. The other issue in terms of cost is most of what we see is what we call a reciprocal, some type of agreement where it allows the traffic to cross between properties, but ultimately the property owners are only responsible for their own parcels. So we would not be asking AFI to maintain anything on the surgical center's property and vice versa. And so we've seen, at least in terms of
Yeah, we're working on it, Mr. Mayor. You said that there was feedback on that line, but that was our phone line, so we're working on it. Can you hear me? No, you can't.
We cannot hear you in the room, and I think Teresa logged out.
Yeah, hang on. We're,
Commissioner Walker?
If you can hear me.
Oh. If I may, I guess, the only thing I want to make sure is that, as I hear the comments made by both Madam Mayor Pro Tem and Madam, that we can, whatever is done, to make sure that we can continue to have them move forward. That's what my concern is. They can move forward, continue to do what needs to be done, and not have some, situation that will stop the movement of what's going forward. And of course, if items 6 and 8 can be removed, fine. If it's going to be softened, as you said, and to support.
Can you hear me, Kevin? Just raise your hand really fast if you can. Okay. So Teresa and I are both able to hear each other, but we can't hear the room. And we were hearing the room, it just stopped.
yeah, we're aware. There's no drop down to unmute this. It just, this is what you get.
Are you okay?
I just want to make sure, that if we hear what was being
No, I
said,
hear your mouth move, but I can't hear you.
we can move forward. That's what I want to make sure. We're moving forward. There should not be no stop block here.
I wonder if you just want to be here, the two of us will try to log back out again and log back in so we don't slow down the momentum in the room.
Yes. Give him a thumbs up. Somebody close to you.
Yeah, I sent him a text.
All right, so you're
So
good.
let's
Mr.
call back
Music?
in.
Two questions. One is this extra expense that they may incur, is that gonna scuttle the deal? That would be one question. I guess if you have talked to them, is this gonna be such a financial impairment that by doing that becomes an issue for them? And two, Chuck, is there examples that you have seen where the DOT has taken a second look and been forgiving and been more open to things? And does us removing or softening some of those items help their argument, hey, the city is doing this, and is there a benefit to that in your eyes with the DOT?
I think DOT does what DOT does, and so I don't think, I don't think the modifications in terms of the specific language we have in the conditional use is really going to affect DOT's ultimate decision. But in terms of past experience, what we have looked at are several factors. How long has the building been vacant? Does the project increase trip generation? And is there an existing clear operational safety issue that we need to have immediately addressed? In this instance, the building's had continuous power service since auto owners owned it, so it hasn't technically been vacant. The proposed use generates less traffic than what was there before. You can have somebody open up an office today, generating more traffic, and that driveway would remain. And I'm not aware of any crash issues at this location. So for us, in our argument, then back to DOT, is that this is not a significant change. It's a change, but it's not a significant change that would require this type of cost.
And in fact, the argument could be made that it's less intrusive than...
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's been our argument.
Okay. So administratively, us moving 6 and 8 helps AFI, and you guys administratively maybe being able to just approve things without coming back to us, but it won't necessarily help with them in their argument with the DOT.
And actually, that's correct. And then with the revised language in 8, we even take that out of the mix. And so the revised language in 8 gives us the flexibility to make sure we're meeting the land development code, but not hold up any of the site plan or the building permits.
All right, thank you.
Requirements.
All right, Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. Chuck, what's the distance between the two driveways?
I think it's right around...
What do they require, 150 feet usually?
I think it's right around 550 to 600 feet.
Those are far apart. They're not bigger site than what I recall, because I know in some areas it's 300 feet, some others 180. I just didn't know if this is 500 feet difference between the two driveways?
Actually, at this location, I think it's 370, and the driveway requirement is 440. So it's 370.
Okay.
which is still
A big distance.
a big distance. I mean, frankly, the bigger issue in this area is the flea market across the street, and that's what we keep trying to remind DOT is there are bigger issues out here than this.
Because that's just on Saturdays and Sundays, as you know. There again, depending on what you want to do, there again, if you were to make a motion on Monday, I would support removing 7 and 8. That simplifies things. But there again, if they're satisfied with the modification of 8, I guess they'll be there on Monday to make some determinations of their own what they wish to start the direction to go. So.
Did you mean 6 and 8?
6
and 8.
6 and 6 and 8.
Yes, Commissioner Madden.
I think I can speak to what their ultimate desire would be to have them both removed, certainly number 6 removed, because they don't want the pressure of that on their conditional use, not knowing what they don't know with working with the doctor and with the, the cross-access, how they can maintain that. The doctor's wanting them to maintain everything, so they've had some difficulty even with those negotiations.
They may not even want to give them cross easement for the other property, would they?
Well, would they prefer not to?
Right.
So their goal is they would love to get rid of both, but certainly it takes the vote of the commission, and I'm only one commissioner, so that's why I want to bring it up today, to have you think about it over the weekend with regard to removing 6 and 8, or keeping them, certainly the modified language in number 8 is more palatable, but it just still kind of muddies the water as far as adding FDOT into the process and that language into their conditional use. So because both of those mention FDOT, if they were removed, then they can just finish with the city and then go on to FDOT and kind of
do the best they can.
If I heard correct from a legal department, 6 and 8 should not. Excuse me.
Speak louder.
I said, if I heard correct from our legal department, that we can still move forward even in this particular situation with 6 and 8 being removed. That's correct?
Yes.
If that's the case, then I'm favorable to that, if that could be the case. So I just want to make sure I heard that. And if I heard Mr. Momby share what he said, he's favoring, I guess, support of that situation as well.
I think he only wants to remove 8, but
As far as 8, the revised language in 8,
but
6 is just to make sure, because 6 is an outright land development code requirement, and so we wanted to make sure that that was clearly stated in the conditional use, because the land development code already requires that cross-access be executed because of the type of roadway that Memorial Boulevard is.
they're going to need that anyway if they don't get that driveway permit from the DOT.
Yes. In fact, not having that cross-access boxes them in a corner and creates probably a bigger issue for AFI than they may be thinking about today.
Yes, Commissioner Reed.
How can we force those two to grant cross easements to each other?
DOT is requiring a cross-access with their permit, and of course we are because of the type of roadway that Memorial is. We've already seen a cross-access easement for the surgical center on the east side, and it's very generic. It doesn't talk about responsibilities of maintenance. It just basically grants access up from the eastern Memorial driveway to the western property boundary of the surgical center. AFI, our expectation is it would just be the reverse of the same thing, that they would allow the surgical center access to the west, not address maintenance, but just allow the traffic to cross back and forth. Now, that's the one wrinkle is if the doctor is adding a condition that is unacceptable to AFI, that's something that we need to then circle back around with the doctor's office and try to work out a solution on that front. And sometimes it may end up being a stub out to the property line with a fence down the middle if that ultimately ends up being the case. But we want at least to make sure that we're adhering to the land development code and facilitating or having that cross-access, and then just leaving it up to the individual property owners in terms of the operations of that. And hopefully, both parties will be reasonable in terms of the expectations of the other in terms of maintenance. I mean, that is a big issue.
And what about the cost of the cross easement?
The cost of the cross-access easement, if the way the site right now, the parking lots actually connect today. So there's no additional cost other than the maintenance. If the maintenance is an issue, then that would be the additional cost. But those parking lots connect today, so there's no additional construction cost associated with that. The bigger issue is going to be the removal of that Memorial Boulevard driveway, which, I mean, there's going to have to be engineered drawings, there's going to be maintenance of traffic on Memorial Boulevard during construction, and just the removal of a driveway that was just rebuilt 5 years ago when Memorial was reconstructed. That's a new driveway. So there's some things out there that's going to be the bigger cost. It could very well exceed the cost of any of the building improvements that AFI is making to their part of the site.
And I think that's their primary concern. I mean, as a nonprofit agency that has to have a capital campaign and do all those different things to serve people with intellectual disabilities, I think I too would give me pause, and they need the site. So that would be my number one cause if I was leading that organization, was just the extra incurring of costs at every turn. Here's another $50,000 for design, which is expensive.
And that's been our message as well, and that's our, we certainly understand where AFI is coming from, and certainly anything that could be a direction to staff to go with the commission's backing back to DOT and say, DOT, can you revisit this, would be extremely helpful.
All right, any other questions or comments? Mayor Mutz, do you have anything? And he just asked that we all please project when we're talking to him. Go ahead.
I apologize for that disease. Maybe it's my older ears. However, when you talk in the front of your mouth, it carries well across the room as opposed to when we talk about it and that in our mouth like that. My question on this is really, do we have a role where we can, if this is approved that way, designate that each party can pay for its own costs on their own property and avoid creating a scenario where there is a forced need for shared costs?
Did you understand that?
I don't know that, how we can force that. I think that's beyond our jurisdiction.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chuck, very, very much as usual. All right, Palmer.
All right, I believe we're on 8. That is an amendment to our existing pole attachment ordinance to recognize the recently passed state legislation you're going to hear about later on this morning from Dave Shep. There's new broadband legislation that requires that we offer a promotional rate of $1 per attachment per pole per year up through July 1st of 2024, if that attachment is necessary to provide broadband service to an unserved or underserved area of the city, or in this case, actually be the utility service territory.
Any questions on that, or do you want to wait for Dave? Yes.
Just the underserved definition, is it in our ordinance, or is it reference the Florida statute or the federal?
We're using an FCC, go ahead.
Commissioner Madden, that the terminology is actually contained in the statute, but in terms of how you depict what areas that is, the State Broadband Office is currently doing a study that will be, I think, it'll be finalized at the end of July 2022, I believe, and that will identify those areas. But in the interim, because the legislation goes into effect July 1st this year, we're going to be using it. The FCC has provided some funding to underserved and unserved areas, and we're going to be using those locations to determine that for our purposes so we can try to comply with state statute.
Okay, and I think that we did an audit under Lakeland Electric. Maybe on Monday we could hear from them with regard to how many poles that this might affect.
I think it's approximately 391, just under 400 poles, I think, was the assessment that Lakeland Electric did. But they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think...
Based on what they think the FCC is going to constitute as underserved.
Correct, it's just under 400 poles.
Give a city and have her.
Yeah. Commissioner Music?
Ramona, you said that there was some funding that was available for that. Is that funding that's going to be able to get kicked to us to offset that difference in the pole rate?
Cindy can probably address the funding issue. I know she's worked very closely on that issue and whether that money would come to us for those specific areas or not, but she can certainly address that. I couldn't answer that question.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. I saw reading the bill, and I guess it was instigated by Josie Tomko, was the one that brought this bill forward. How's that going to affect us financially?
Again, I think financially it won't have a significant impact to us because we're only dealing with just under 400 poles out of all of in our electric service territory. So it shouldn't have a significant impact. I don't know what the dollar number amount would be to us, but as far as poles go, I don't think it will.
And what do we charge for pole now?
$20 to $25.
$20.70.
And so
So it'd be
we'll-
19 times 300 or 400 would probably be the financial impact, whatever that number is.
All right, other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Madden.
I did just want to clarify, so the length of the $1 per year, is that in perpetuity for those particular poles that attach during that period, or is that period the only time in which they'll pay $1 instead of the 25?
It's through 2024.
It's what?
2024.
It's a pole attachment fee, so the difference would be $19.24 per pole times whatever, how many poles are affected.
Forever?
No.
The year 2024.
Well, it looks like, though, the new attachments during that period get that $1 per year rate.
Through 2024.
Right.
That period expires.
It will sunset, okay?
Yes, unless the legislature passes some additional.
Okay, it just doesn't seem like it denotes that very clearly.
It says the promotional rate shall only apply to such new attachments effective July 1st, 2021 until July 1st, 2024.
So it makes me think that you newly attach during that period, and then you get this special rate.
Why don't we just add a sentence, just to make it clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? All right. Seeing no CRA update, or the city manager doesn't have anything, or do you have anything?
We actually have one more
I'm so sorry.
ordinance there that snuck in at the bottom. That is just a housekeeping amendment to the police pension plan ordinance. Again, IRS regulations have changed to now require the minimum age for distribution from your retirement plan is now 72. That's being increased from 70 and a half, age 70 and a half, so that is being changed in our ordinance as well to be consistent with IRS regulations. And this also just specifies that any cost savings as a result of the city issuing pension obligation bonds, which we did about a year ago, would be shared with the employees under this plan on a one-to-one cost-sharing basis.
Questions? Okay. Now, do you?
I have, yes, Mayor Pro Tem, I have two verbals. First of all, Commissioners, the items that were on your, in front of your places at the table today were items that the city had in our inventory, in stock, and they're really just to help us and ask you to help us promote the fact that the RP Funding Center is open for business coming up soon on July the 1st. We will be back to 100% occupancy. All of the events that are scheduled for the RP Funding Center are listed on the RP Funding Center website, and that includes the very popular Broadway series. So we're soon back to 100%. We're excited about that and would hope that you might could help us just promote that in the community. That was my first verbal. The second is, at the last City Commission meeting, there was much discussion about the traffic concerns around Lakeland Christian School, and so staff was directed to hold a community meeting. Staff's been working on that, and we have scheduled that meeting for July the 13th. It changed to the 12th. Okay, I'm sorry, then July the 12th. At the Lakeland Christian School athletic building, and so that is the date and time for that community meeting.
Could we make sure they get calendar for us, please?
We will.
We'll send you a calendar invite.
Thank you.
Okay, that completes 6 p.m.
Or 6 p.m. Thank you. 6 p.m., sorry.
Sean, just on that meeting, are we facilitating that as the city with the school and the neighbors, and how does the
We've actually got Mark Wilson from Kenley Horn who's going to assist us in that capacity. So we will have someone there who will kind of facilitate that community discussion.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
We're back to you.
All right, the first ordinance for first reading is in isolation from what's actually going on. We're looking to exempt the position of emergency manager from civil service, and in the process of doing that, we were going to simply amend a resolution, and we discovered that there's all sorts of different resolutions that exempt different positions, and there's a couple of ordinances that do it as well, so we're going to try to clean all this up. So this is simply repealing some of the ordinances, old ordinances we have that list some of those positions that are exempt. We're also going to come back with a resolution that repeals all the other resolutions and just have a single consolidated resolution with all the positions that are exempt, just for ease of record keeping.
Yeah.
So this is just, once again, another housekeeping item.
Questions? Okay.
Okay, the second item, another housekeeping item, really is related to the firefighters' retirement system. We're slowly getting different tweaks to that from the legal counsel for these different plans. And what this is doing is changing our ordinance with respect to the firefighter pension plan to specify that any changes that are required from year to year as a result of actuarial changes would simply be done at the recommendation of the actuary, because that is what we're required to do anyway. So when the actuary specifies that an increase or decrease in contributions has to occur, that will just happen as a result of that recommendation, versus having to change the ordinance every time that occurs, which we haven't done anyway. So this is actually bringing us into practice into conformity with what our actual practice is.
Do we have an actuary on site, or is that an outsourced?
Outsourced. Yeah.
It's outsourced.
Each of the boards has the authority to hire their own actuary.
Okay.
The police and fire actually are using the same actuary, and then the city general employees board uses a different actuary.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
All right, under resolutions, the first one we're going to pull is that, once again, is related to that advertising issue with the demolition assessments. Second item is a change in the name of a road. There's a little private road called Airfield Court Way. I believe that's totally internal to the airport, and it's directly south of Airport Road. So what this resolution will do will change the name of Airfield Court Way to Airport Road, so it's a continuation of Airport Road to the north of Drainfield. This has been coordinated with the city's property information office, Polk County's 911 office, as well as the post office, United States Post Office, and they're all on board with that.
We shouldn't name it Gene Conrad Way. You want to do that, Gene?
I'm going to do that.
Okay.
Wrong, it's Airfield Court West.
Okay, sorry.
So it just,
West. It was, or will be, East Shore.
it just extends the road all the way south and continues to.
Correct. This is the road that's going to public access down to the new FBO site, so we're just extending Airport Road all the way down because it's public access all the way to the
It's
FBO.
pretty much contiguous, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, sticking with the airport, the next resolution is an amendment to a grant agreement with the FDOT relating to the construction phase of Taxiway E on the airport grounds. The DOT will be increasing their grant to the city by the amount of $355,000. There is a kind of a matching deal with this, so the city's portion would go up by $88,750 as well in order to access that $355,000 from the FDOT. Gene has anything to add to that?
Questions? Okay.
Next item is similar. This is an amendment to a grant agreement with the DOT for the ILS Category 3 project at the airport. The DOT will be increasing its grant to the city by the amount of $2,852,539. It's an 80-20 match. The city would be required to increase its contribution by $713,134. Again, Gene can elaborate if necessary.
Yes, and just on this one, you will see several of these coming over the next several years as the DOT, the aviation program, they've committed $18.7 million as total project cost, so they're paying 80% of that. So you will continue to see these as they're adding more money to the grant to reimburse us for the project, which we're already under construction for.
And the amount, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And the amount that the city is required, that's already budgeted money that you've got, and then.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Other questions? Okay.
Okay, finally is an agreement with the DOT that we've been doing for years now. We enter into 5-year agreements on a regular cycle with the DOT. The city's traffic management department handles all the monitoring of traffic signals and associated traffic conditions and figures out whether tweaks to the traffic signal timing needs to be made. And so the DOT delegates that responsibility to us and pays us $165,000 per year to do that. Under this agreement, we would do it at $165,000 per year through June 30th of 2026.
Is that enough money?
That's what I asked.
Greg?
No, it's not, is it?
There's never enough money.
Wow.
But it does supplement what we get from what we do out of the transportation fund. We have actually 2 funding agreements with DOT. We receive annual funds on this one, and then we have one that I think it's somewhere around a little over $600,000. That actually, what they do with that one is pay us per leg of an intersection. That's a state road. And then since we have fiber interconnection between all of our signals, we get an extra amount per intersection for that as well. So between the 600 and some odd thousand and this 165,000, it pays for, I think it's close to 5 personnel, as well as what's needed to do the studies and transferring the data. We have to do quarterly reports. And so this is kind of help, I think, incentivize us to, they want to see the data, so this kind of helps incentivize us to provide that to them.
So if we aggregate it out, how much can we pay people per hour, even if they're salaried? Would the reporting side of this even be covered by the $165,000 a year? Because it sounds like that's an arduous part of the process.
It may very well. I have to take a closer look at that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just talking about it sounds like the reporting side would cost us just that amount of money alone, and not even the front-end work and the labor of implementing everything that they want us to implement. And there's no room for negotiation with them.
No, we used to not
Similar to the
get any money.
thing with Memorial Boulevard, it's a little difficult, yeah.
You know, it's like the same way with street lighting on DOT roads. We used to maintain it at our cost. And then, gosh, it must have been 20 years ago, they began giving us annual compensation. They started out at just a smidge per pole, and then it's increased over the years. And I think because we have, I think now, what that rate is, but it gradually has increased, and it helps offset the cost. In no way does it pay 100% of the cost.
Right, but it had the string attached.
Each of them usually do. We have, either maintenance that's required on a specific timetable, or, and some of the things too, we did need to incorporate. One of the things was looking at an annual inspection of our traffic signals from pole down to underground, and so that's really helped us kind of push along our maintenance program as well. So, all in all, it's better than it could be, I guess.
Right, well, yeah, sure. Yes, Commissioner Reed.
Thank you.
You can speak loud, Commissioner.
Thank you. Greg, I'll talk this way, but I'm speaking to Greg.
And we'll let Greg come move to your sideline.
Is this the best place to speak, right?
Yes.
This thing here?
These are all the microphones.
Okay. Our monitoring of South Florida Avenue, we do that on a daily basis, weekly basis, hourly, because I know in the afternoon it's a lot different than it is at, well, it's not much different now anymore, but how do we monitor the traffic with our signalization on South Florida Avenue?
South Florida Avenue, like many of our other state roads, we have CCTV cameras mounted that we can actually observe what's happening at the different intersections. And so typically, if you've ever been in our traffic management center, we've got a wall that's nothing but TV monitors, and where we can specifically look at certain intersections. Florida Avenue is one that we always have up there, and they're able then to take a look. We can receive data from the control cabinets and then actually make remote changes to timing and stuff right there from the office, and then return it back. So if we see something building that's an issue, or looks like it's creating an issue, we have the opportunity to make a change, and for a short time, we can adjust the timing temporarily. Anything permanent, we end up running through the regular channels with FDOT to get their approval, but temporary changes we can make, on the fly, and then return it back within an hour and a half time period or something like that.
Any other questions on this item? And I have, not a question necessarily for you, but kind of towards you, Mr. James. Can we, so through my transit work and through transportation planning organization and through the city, DOT is this ominous kind of creature that I continue to have to talk about and understand how we all work together in all those entities. Can we have a workshop at some point, not to add more to our calendar, but and not imminent, but just to help us on clarifying the DOT piece and our responsibilities? Because even with the road diet, that's really hard for me to clarify in my mind of what is our responsibility and what is their responsibility, and are they, you know, how does that all work? And just to have some clarifying language as commissioners to understand that, you know, when we're asked about the road diet or even about this thing with AFI, or, you know, where is our oversight either circumvented by them, or they're the overarching oversight people, or, does that make sense? Okay, so can we do something
Sure,
like that?
yeah, if the commission would like us to.
I mean, I don't know if y'all want to do that.
That's fine. I think that would be helpful, and, you know, I know as a new commissioner coming on last year to TPO, I don't know how you felt last week, but there's just a lot.
Oh, no, absorb it all.
In terms of trying to figure So you're good, all right, well.
I got real close to Sarah and ask her help.
Mr. McCarthy and I will have a workshop with staff.
Absolutely, I think it's a great idea.
We'll put that on the schedule.
Thank you.
I think it should be inclusive too of everything, because people, I think, even don't understand even sidewalks.
Right.
You know, that those DOT roads, that's what they, you know, and I think, I've learned this over the years, and I thought, really? You know, and it's okay.
Well, there's certainly this overarching opinion that if it's inside the boundaries of the city of Lakeland, then it's the city of Lakeland. And that certainly isn't the case.
So learning curve for several years for myself.
All right, thank you very much, thank you, Mr. Strauss. All right, Finance Director, Mr. Grossart, you have anything?
No, ma'am.
All right, Utility, doesn't look like anything, we don't have audience in here. All right, we can do Mayor and Commission. Mayor, do you have anything you want to, I'll kick it to you first, if you have comments.
Just the fact that we have some Juneteenth celebrations coming up this weekend, and an awareness of that as they occur, and appreciation for your comment on FDOT. I don't know really that it will require so much workshop as it might even be something that Chuck could put together some slides on it so that we could just have some clarity on sometime in an agenda study. Yeah, I mean, just so that we're all ready to hold the pieces together. And then lastly, the comment that we're moving forward, we need to relay as I'm getting information with respect to body cams, and of course we'll need a follow-up workshop probably on that.
Everybody just smiling on.
Yeah. I can voice it every day.
We can't hear you.
He can't hear you.
The phone died. His phone right here. It disconnected or something happened to it.
Did it turn off?
Say thank you.
You need to call the number back.
You'll have to call back.
I just said,
Yes, we lost you too. He
yes,
just mouthed, he lost us.
you've left. The phone has left the meeting.
Maybe just text him, Kevin.
Yeah.
Tell him we all
So you
concur.
just went in and literally, yeah.
No, they didn't.
You want the number
I got back
gone?
to the office and got there that day. 2 days, or the next day.
I usually get them after 1 to 6. I mean, I get the electronic one, but it's just
I
a
didn't even
lot.
get that to look, so it's done.
Okay, he said to move on.
Yeah.
All right, yes, sir, Commissioner
I guess
Walker.
could we make, you ask some comments?
Yes.
Next meeting's at
Yep.
10.
But we don't have to fill all the time till 10. But no, go ahead.
I got that clarification, that's good.
Don't feel necessary.
No, I don't have one or two things. I think the mayor's already mentioned about the Juneteenth celebration tomorrow, you know, the Coleman Bush, and
3 to 5, right?
it's 3 to 5, but then they did a virtual thing afterwards, I think, so I think with a couple of guest speakers kind of situation. But on June 24th, The gang task force, as well as LPD, will be doing what we call engaged Lakeland kind of a situation. At a recent help me out, Ms. Kelly, a recent gang task force meeting, which was back first part of the year, we had some concerns about, with the pandemic situation where it has been, and virtually with students in school and some of them in school regularly as well. How will we shape up our summer? Because young folk out of school, we see a lot of situations that we have dealt with in the past, and thankfully we've seen crime statistics come down, especially among our young folk. But anyway, there's going to be an engaged Lakeland kind of a meeting with senior pastors, along with the gang task force and the LPD, June 24th at the Dream Center. 7 a.m. breakfast kind of meeting, yes, from 7 to about 8. That's when the time period is. And we just want to make sure that the clergy, who have been so, and faith-based community, has been so supportive with our gang task force situation from years back into present time, is make sure they know how to make this even more win-win situation and help support, moving forward. The mayor's going to be there. I know he's going to be there. I will be there, and of course, you all invited. If you're the gang task force team as well. I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, we got about 25, 27 pastors that plan to attend from all over Lakeland. So it should be a very good, diverse group of senior pastors or their designee to be a part of this kind of discussion. I'm thankful to God, first of all, that we've not seen the problems we've had some years back. I know it took many of us to come to the table as we did to help resolve and then solve, in some respect, the challenges that we were faced with back then. But, we can't, I tell folks, keep your fingers on the pulse, because things could pop in the time now. And with the kind of, I hate to say the polarization we have in our country, certainly we don't see it in our community, and we don't want it in our community. But how much we can be even more talking and sharing and being part of discussions to help the situation overall. So June 24th, 7 o'clock in the morning at the Dream Center.
And I think it's great that it continues, even though we've seen less violence and we've seen less activity. I think that conversation has to continue to make sure that we are ahead of the curve. So thank you for doing that. And Commissioner Madden too. Thank y'all. All right. Reed?
Thank you. There again, when Commissioner Selvig was here, we talked about the different green space and stuff like that. Invariably, I know that we have acquired that new piece for the dog park near the fire station. And we have that, and there's a lot of activity around the joinery and all the stuff around Lake Mira, and we have that piece that we're going to be the dog park. I was hoping that we might get with the CR to make that a public parking area, environmentally friendly of some sort, because there's just no place to park there in the afternoons and evenings, particularly on weekends. And with the red, white kaboom coming up and those type things, I think we need to open up that bit of space for public parking. We can do it environmentally sensitive, where some kind of it's not pavement, but it would still percolate water and stuff like that, and open up, because there's a big need for parking with all the traffic I see around the walking traffic particularly. I know the parking lot's going to open up sooner or later at Summit, but there again, I think with the traffic going on at the joinery and the steakhouse and all the other places there's a bigger need for public parking by the particular area. If something we could do, maybe I don't know if the CRA could do something. But that's just something I've been thinking about, and people have asked me what we can do about more parking in that particular area.
That lot has not come up since my time on the CRA. We haven't discussed that. I know there have been some discussions about the future of that and what we do with it, but so far we haven't specifically addressed that.
Maybe they can.
Yeah, we'll see. I just know there are different thoughts on what to do with that lot. I'm not sure and I don't know where the board is on that, but we can certainly
Yeah,
discuss
I'm
it.
not in favor of selling it by any means. It's hard to find property around the lake as it is, and that's, I've already getting a lot of pushback from some of the building, but invariably, that's neither here nor there, but.
Commissioner Music? Oh, sorry.
If I may, just to respond to that, we'll certainly take a look at that and study it. I'm not sure that that's CRA-owned property. I think it is city-owned property. So the only thing I think, but however, there might be some ability to, get some funding through the CRA for the improvement of it potentially as a, I got you. Okay, so we'll take a look at that and we can respond back to that request.
It is general fund on that property.
Yeah.
We had to research it a while back.
Okay. Commissioner Music?
Yeah, and Mr. James had left, but I just wanted to say thanks. A lot of these departments here I've been able to meet with in the last several weeks or so, and then really appreciate it. I had a really long tour yesterday with Public Works, which was really interesting. In fact, Greg was in the senior class when my father first moved down here and taught, so he was the first senior that my dad taught. So that was kind of neat to talk with him. But I just appreciate staff really setting those up and giving me a nice insight to kind of what's behind the curtain. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yes, Commissioner Madden?
Thank you. So I was able to have a meeting with Peace yesterday, specifically to talk to Michael Anderson, who is the gentleman who across the country is involved with a nonprofit organization that deals with trust funds for cities for affordable housing. So I know that I think the mayor and maybe another commissioner had maybe met Michael Anderson, and so I just wanted to kind of meet him myself and to hear from him and get his perspective, especially where we are for me, the fourth year of being a commissioner, and kind of just thinking about, when the mayor came on as mayor, we had the homeless consultant for about a year. And it was difficult to kind of enact some of those strategies because it was like really late in the budget cycle, and we didn't know what we thought as a commission about how to address homelessness, and how you think about homelessness is very different depending on if it's homelessness in our downtown park or if it's a single mom, living in the Lighthouse residential area. And so at that point, Stephanie Madden's perspective was, let's let the faith-based organizations, handle this social need, and let's let our LPD help, assist our downtown businesses in Munn Park. And then it sort of pivoted for us as a commission. I'm kind of rounding this out for some of our newer commissioners, that it doesn't matter if we have a line item in the budget to give assistance to the single mom who's about to lose her apartment, or to those who are living in Lighthouse if there are no units at large. And so then we've seen that across the country, there is a shortage of housing units, which is causing, the price of housing to go sky high. And then we've also looked to LEDC, and some of our city management team have gone to some cities that we want to emulate, like Chattanooga and Greenville, South Carolina. And then you get excited about the progress they've made going to the second step, which we're endeavoring to do with our exponential growth that we're seeing in the next decade that's projected for our area. And yet they bemoan the fact that they left some folks behind in the process. And so I think it was this commission's desire to say, we don't want to leave people behind. If we can start from the beginning, rather than look back and say, well, if we would have just adjusted some of the things that we did, our whole city could have been a part of this revitalization and growth. So whether it's, Commissioner Walker working on the gang task force or Commissioner McLeod working with CRA, we've done a lot of things to try to do Lincoln Square and to give money to construction builders, and lots to try to see if we could build single-family home. We recognized pretty quickly that that's going to be a pretty slow road to housing families, if the city's building single-family homes or subsidizing those. And then we found that there were opportunities to work with multifamily developers, that if we give them city funds, and that gives them extra points, and they can go get the federal and state dollars, and the projects that we get in return, like the Green Mills project that we were able to see here recently, are just amazing. They have a weight room and a community room. It's mixed income levels all living together, which is kind of the new model, instead of putting all at-risk people and all low socioeconomic folks in one area to mix that. So this trajectory that we've had for 3.5 years, really trying to solve, the sort of the homelessness, but also affordable housing puzzle, is saying, how do we best leverage our dollar? Of course, I like to, the queen over there, she was on CRA when I came into this whole learning curve, and thinking, wow, okay, that project, $1 was leveraged 7 times with private funding. On this one, it was like $1 we gave was diminished and went, down the drain. Let's make sure we're using our dollars to be leveraged with private funds. We saw that with our parking garage, and we're seeing that with a lot of different initiatives with P3 partnerships. So I kind of wanted to go, now that I have a little bit more, information, talk to Peace specifically with regard to this trust fund and say, okay, we've been watching the Sadowski Fund get rated every year. We've been advocating on behalf of keeping those funds, for affordable housing that actually do have a dedicated revenue stream. And we're hopeful that this was the year that it would be fully funded for affordable housing. I was able to talk to David Shep, and he was kind of able to talk me off the ledge to say $200 that's dedicated, $200 million that is dedicated, is better than, $400 million that's there, not dedicated, that could be used, any way you want to use it. And so that kind of made me start thinking about the trust fund idea. So, every year we as a commission, a big part of our job is budget allocation. It takes 3/4 of the year to get all of it allocated. And we could get so excited about our movement from $500,000 to $750,000 this year to be allocated to do just what we've been talking about, work with builders, get as much affordable housing and housing in general built as fast as we can now that people can get loans and things like that. So if we had a trust fund and it was dedicated, I was worried that it was, you can only use the interest. So you have to get this big nest egg, and by the time you get the nest egg, you missed all the opportunity for the cheap money to build and work with the builders in 2021. It is not the case that you have to wait until you have a nest egg and use the interest only. The trust fund, and the way they explained it in the 600 cities across the country who use them, you can do it differently based on your ordinance, based on your city. There's a lot of flexibility in how the trust funds can be used and how you set it up by your specific ordinance. So it sounds like the benefit to us, if we wanted to consider hearing more about a trust fund, is transparency, to say this is, so I just said in a nutshell where we've been as a commission, where I feel like we've been. It takes your city along with that journey. It gives builders and construction, companies and developers a way to figure out, okay, this is what the city has been doing. They've been morphing, they've been pivoting. Now this is what they do. And so then they have some clarity, they have some consistency. We could do some RFPs maybe with more clarity, because we know every year what we want to have happen in our city. Do we want to collectively agree that we want the city funds to be designated for those most at risk, most that need that 50% and below, AMI? How do we, not that it built that, and that does not also preclude, I thought it meant that if we spent our money on a project, that whole project would have to fit those parameters. No, but if our money as a percentage of the project gives us the percentage of that project with units in that category, that's different than we can only invest in things that are 50% AMI and below. Does that make sense? So if in your ordinance, your focus is trying to get families, single moms and families who are at that lowest income level, to get some more units in that category, but you could still partner with builders who can have a collection of different income levels. I thought that was different from how I'd heard it before. So both how to designate it to those most at risk, but not precluding options to work with builders outside those parameters was different and flexible. Secondly, not just having to wait until you have a big nest egg and only use the interest was different for me. I thought there was something to be said to having, kind of a legacy for this commission in that trust fund ordinance to say, will the next commissioners continue to prioritize affordable housing, or will they do what has been done at the state level to the Sadowski Fund? So that to me was, kind of a perk to going the trust fund route. So I would just wanted to bring this up to you while it's fresh in my mind. I met with him yesterday and was able to hear from Michael Anderson. He said that his assistance level, he does this work for free, and he could, sort of look at other cities similarly. If we did have kind of, this is what we are looking for, he could bring to us some models to use as a guide, kind of like we did with broadband attachments. Cindy went to a lot of other cities to see what they were doing. But certainly, I know in the past I kind of was not as interested in the trust fund idea because of some of the things that I thought, and they were able to, clarify. So basically, I'm bringing this up to see if any of you would like to meet with Michael Anderson. Peace could, coordinate that. We had a Zoom call, and then the second thing is when I came on, I think the mayor has been very frank. I know Commissioner McCarley had a conversation with Peace, and I did myself, that when you come as the new commissioner and you are aggressively met with these questions on a stage in front of thousands of people, and are you going to say yes or are you going to say no? That's very intimidating, number one. But secondly, if anyone cares about their word at all, they would not say yes to something they're not sure they're able to perform. And so I think that initially it was, some of the commissioners may have felt a little bit like, I don't know if this is the organization that I'd like to work with. And I think they've changed their posture a lot because of the work of our mayor, to engage and have conversation and build trust. But they were really, at the end of the meeting, wanted to make sure that this commission knew that they respected and appreciated all of the work that we've done. And although they are specifically trying to target those families with kids, they know how hard our task is and how complicated it is, and they wanted me to make sure that I was able to communicate that to everyone here, our staff, everyone that has endeavored to do what we've done in the last 3.5 years about affordable housing, that they honored our efforts, and that they wanted to, really the goal of talking about the trust fund was not to say we think you could do it better, it's just to really continue the legacy that we've already started. So I did think that was a nice olive branch and a nice message to be able to deliver, and I felt like the meeting went a lot better than I anticipated, and I felt a lot more hopeful about what the trust fund could potentially do. So that is my update on that.
The mayor has a question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
First of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I want to make sure that's true. I appreciate that meeting very much, and actually the recap that you did, Commissioner Madden, because it is kind of the growth of the process of understanding how we can do the most impact possible. And there's two elements that I'd like to touch base on with respect to the trust fund. One is that we had decided and put away $23 million in a trust fund and assume about a 3% interest, which is a bit conservative, but assume that about that's safe 3% interest from it. We spend about $700,000 a year in terms of getting those funds moved towards affordable housing. That's our allocation. We're $750 towards affordable housing. And so even though we don't have the trust fund itself per se in terms of principal tied up in producing it, and one of the benefits of the trust fund, by the way, also was that we anticipated other people could put money into it. But when pressed on that, Michael Anderson did not have other cities where that was done well, and that where people did it primarily was funded by the government. So I feel like, at least on a delivery mechanism, we have something in place that supports affordable housing and that we're moving in that regard. But the other thing I'd like us to do is take a look at community land trusts, which really comes out of community development, and to talk about where we continue to own the land, the buyer never pays for the land, and you develop an area so that the people only ever get equity on the house they sell. And the land that the city continues to own keeps an area lifted up well and established solidly. And there are community land trusts in Orlando that have been done well in that regard that are around us. So this is seriously, and plus we know people who aren't trying to buy affordable housing just want to buy housing right now. We're in an absolutely abnormal market today, and we're seeing things happen with land values today that won't sustain. And so our ability to maybe isolate something like a community land trust, we probably want to do to some area where we're really, it's blighted enough or ignored enough that we'd really want to do something pretty dramatic. But at least to begin some discussions on those things. I'm really appreciative too of Pieces, to echo your comment, Pieces' absolute reduced tension and friction in the way we're addressing these matters and an openness to have a conversation. And I think it's a reflection of you as a commission, because you have clearly moved into the need to address affordable housing aggressively. And so all those things, just to mention that I don't know that we're off the path of what, as a city our size, we can be doing as pretty aggressively. We should be pretty. I certainly am grateful for the support that has been provided by our commission and continues to be as we work for increasing the affordable housing, and particularly for single-parent families as part of that consideration. So thank you, and I appreciate your report.
Thank you, that was very good. Thanks so much. Any other, yes, Commissioner McLeod.
I'll try to be quick. Recently, there was a meeting with the Homeless Coalition, and the issue of Munn Park came up, and that was Julie Townsend presented and talked about just, this is not a new issue, and I know when Commissioner Madden, you mentioned homelessness, but there seems to be some frustration with LDDA and business owners, just continuing issues of homeless panhandling and behaviors. And so I told Julie and I had a good conversation, and I said, I want to take it back to the commission and just, I don't know what the policy solutions are, but that we as a group have that discussion and just know that continues to be out there. Mayor, I know that, excuse me, Mayor, I know that you worked on the caseworker plan, and just wanted to come back as a body and talk about what are the options for Munn Park. Sean and I have had some discussions, and what are there things that we need to do from a policy standpoint? Are there things from just improving the park itself that don't make it as attractive to for people to linger? But it was a popular item of discussion for the Homeless Coalition a couple of weeks ago. And so my message to them was, let me take it back to the commission. Let me talk to my colleagues and just see, what are their thoughts, and are there things that maybe we're missing or maybe we could be doing? I know, Sean, one of the things we've talked about is trying to just bring more activity into the park and have more things that are going on. But that is something I want to be able to go back when that group meets. I think it's in August or September, and just report back and say, here's where we are, here's what we think, as we continue to talk about downtown revitalization and redevelopment, keeping an eye on Munn Park, and how do we make it a place that is not necessarily just an attractive spot for people to linger who don't have other things going on. So wanted to mention that, and just Sean, I don't know if you have things that some of the updates, and I know you have worked with Julie as well, but wanted us to be mindful of that for sure.
Yes. No, thank you, Commissioner. We've had some good conversations. I continue to talk with Julie. As a matter of fact, on the conference that I was just at in Indianapolis in the Carmel area, Julie and I were texting ideas and having conversations back and forth, about that. It is high priority for me to do something about Munn Park. There's a lot of comments, and even this morning, about it just kind of looks old, and there's just not any activity there. And so I brought back some ideas. I've got some photographs of things that I saw while I was on at that conference and on that trip that would be geared toward just that. And I do think, and in a lot of the conversations that we've had in meetings with Julie and some of the providers, to the homeless, we've talked about need for activity and how that can help. We've made some changes down at the park to remove some of the access for charging phones and the like to try to help. We've put the street lighting to try to attract people to the area. We've got some upcoming concerts that are planned there in the middle of Munn Park. And so one of the main focuses is just that, getting some activity going on a regular basis in that park to try to really bring back the public use that used to be there years ago that just doesn't seem to be there as much anymore.
If I may add, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I say this from a historical perspective, and I think it's because, and I don't say this, please understand, it's not to be forthright in saying I'm the oldest kid on the block, but there were some things that were done that were shared and talked about some years back. And I'm going to take you back to a time when we were talking about the relocation of the statue, because we had that intense and very conversation that came about, and of course now, as we know, the Confederate statue being relocated. I don't say removed, because I'm trying to make sure people understand it's not removed. It's just being went from one park basically to another park and being sensitive to the situation at the time. But there was conversations about Ball Park then. What's going to happen now? We took this particular piece out of the park, which is the center of our park, and boom. And there were big conversations they were had at that time with LDDA suggestions and all. But it just seemed like it got lost in the process. So I agree with you, Commissioner McLeod. It is time, because that got lost in the process. Because there were things talking about maybe putting a merry-go-round or something. Do you call merry-go-round?
Carousel.
Carousel. Thank you. You see how old I am with my children.
Same thing.
Well, but anyway, there was things like that talked about. Even having bringing back a band kind of a shell or something. Those things were talked about. And I guess, again, it just got lost. We got busy, or we get busy, as it would be. Change of guard comes about, as it has. And I think you're right, we need to get back to that. And even going back to the situation with the homeless situation, I can remember the coalition started, way back when, even under Mayor Fields, who was there, Fletcher? Yes. As Fletcher was going out, Fields came in. The coalition was even more talking, having it being established and talked about, but then things got lost, it seemed like. And you get, and all these other things kind of happening, and you forget. Or not so much we forget, I guess we just, things happen, change of guard happens, commission changes, all those kind of things. But both of those items, that's what commission goes back in history, and will help probably us even continue conversations on both those particular subject matters if we want to do that. I think it's important to do.
I think it was Commissioner Reed that said after we moved the monument, we had LDDA propose the carousel. He said, let's vote to put this off a year. People are just too hot-tempered, and then the second year's been COVID. So you're right, it has been.
Well, and just to bring it back in for a landing, since we're 2 minutes ahead until the meeting, the mayor wanted me to share that this is his quote, "We are going to discuss with LDDA to have them fund and assign a case manager to work the downtown homeless full-time and explore working opportunities and attempt to increase the accountability. Earlier work in this regard was primarily to homeless camps and not downtown." So, and my only additional comment would be we're very hospitable to more of it's very important for us to say when we're talking about the homeless population in downtown Lakeland, that is different than affordable housing and people who are homeless, who might be children in the school system who are sleeping on someone's couch and they're not out on the street per se. So those are two different definitions of homelessness. What we're talking about here specifically, if I'm hearing my colleagues correctly, is people who are downtown throughout the day. They might be at a shelter at night, but they are downtown, throughout the day and evening hours and maybe panhandling. And so we have to, as a city and a community, figure out how to be less hospitable to that situation. And I think we're doing the best we can in connecting people to case management and working with all of our shelters and working with Gospel Inc. and with several other entities around the community. I feel very proud of the work this commission has done and the previous commissions in this regard, but obviously Munn Park, just like when you're in another city somewhere else, there's a collection of more of the transient homeless population that we have to deal with. So I thank you for bringing this up and coming in. I'm glad the mayor piped in on this, and as well as Commissioner Walker and everyone else. Did you want to add?
He's not assigned to to that anymore, is he? Wasn't it Officer Bailey that,
Callahan now.
okay.
Yes,
Because I feel like we kind of got some updates from Officer Bailey when he initially took that on.
Well, I think COVID has probably hijacked us more than we think on certain issues.
I was going to say, as a commissioner on the LDDA board, we met yesterday, and that was a large chunk of what we talked about was that, and there was an update from the officer that there are some new individuals that are hanging out there. So they're getting very comfortable down there, and so it certainly is a thing that needs to be addressed. So I think, and what the mayor had said about the social worker and stuff, that was talked about as well. So it certainly is something that for that particular demographic of the people who have businesses right on the park, it's a big deal. And we've got some quality real estate for sale, and obviously those individuals are going to be looking across at what they're looking at. So
Good discussion. Thank y'all. Mr. Mayor, do you have anything else to add? Nope. All right, I think we can, you want a 5-minute break, 2-minute break, 1-minute break?
at least 2.
We'll come back at 10:05.
Thank you.
I try, y'all want to.
Watch this, just click down. You got 3 minutes, whatever you can say in 3 minutes.
Yes, we all came back from the beach, all of us. Kids are, I don't get to anything.
Seattle has bad allergies, so we used to take them to the beach. And I think it was because our